Hello and welcome to Lamestream, a show that guides you through the crisis in media and how it's impacting everything. I'm Osman Faruqi. I'm here with my co-host Scott Mitchell. Scott, how are you? How's the weekend?
I'm doing very well. Managed to catch up with a few friends. How are you doing?
Pretty good. One thing that I have not paid any attention to really beyond the news, Scott, in the last couple of weeks is the Commonwealth Games. Are you plugged into
You're
this?
really stretching our audience's attention for sport if you're going to do a Commonwealth Games seg. Yeah, I'm waiting to hear this.
I'm not like watching the Commonwealth Games. I don't really care about the Commonwealth Games. It's just sort of funny when you catch these news headlines and these segments on the TV and the radio where it's like Australia won another like 35 gold medals overnight, which I think just serves as a reminder that this weird tournament is just like a handful of wealthy white countries absolutely destroying like former British colonies. That's the whole point of these things. It's gotten to the point, it's so absurd how many golds we keep winning. I saw this headline of, I think, a pole vaulter, Nina Kennedy. She won silver. And I was like, if you're winning silver at the Commonwealth Games as Australia, like that is now a failure, I feel. I feel like that's the bar that these people have set. But I can't, as much as, you know, I love sport, I just refuse to get into these games unless, of course, Pakistan does well, which I don't think they have at all, these games. But yeah, just the sheer number of successes for Australia, I think, make the whole thing look like a bit of a spectacle rather than a real serious sporting tournament.
I have no sporting take on the Commonwealth Games. My only take is a fashion take, which is Australia's Commonwealth Games uniforms designed by Charlie Kennedy. Shout out Charlie Kennedy, the younger brother of like one of my best friends in high school.
Oh, wow.
You know, product of the public school system, Charlie Kennedy, designing Australia's opening ceremony uniform. They look great. Shout out Charlie.
That is great. I do know that there is some drama over the netball outfits. There's some issue with it. No disrespect to people more plugged into that than I am. I don't know the specifics of it. I also know that we lost the netball semifinals to Jamaica. Shout out Jamaica. Like, good to see one of these former colonies that's not Australia win. Anyway, that's all I've got on the Commonwealth Games. We can get into the episode now. Coming up on today's show, images of 50,000 Moroccans crossing the border into a Spanish enclave have dominated global news headlines for the past few days, fueling the far right and sparking a new debate over immigration in Europe. But what actually happened? Far from being some kind of genuine surge of migrants or asylum seekers, the issue actually looks to be one of global diplomatic power plays involving a number of foreign governments combined with the spread of disinformation on social media. So we're going to break all of that down on today's show. And Gina Rinehart has launched an all-out war on the ABC alongside her allies at News Corp. She's threatening the broadcaster with legal action after it aired a satirical video that she says threatened her with violence. All of that coming up on today's episode.
Ridiculous. So much to get into. But first, Oz, at the end of the week, we are doing the last date, the last leg of our national tour. We're going to Hobart, Friday, August 7. This has been a long time coming, and we're pretty excited about it. Crystal Andrews will join us. There are still a few tickets left, going fast. So anyone in Hobart, get down. It's going to be a great night and a lot of fun. We can't wait to see everyone in Hobart.
Yeah, really crept up. Can't believe that in a few days we'll be in Tasmania. Very excited. Going to have a great time there. One more thing before we get into the show, Scott. Last week we reported on the drama unfolding at the ABC over the removal of multiple episodes of the prestigious current affairs investigations program Four Corners. We published a long read on all of it on Friday on our website. And in that piece, we revealed that the Walkleys, the premier prize in Australian journalism, had removed a bunch of pages on its website that mentioned the reporter at the centre of the controversy, Mahmoud Fazal, including the webpage listing him as a Walkley Award winner. The Walkleys told us that they had removed those pages because Fazal was being investigated by the ABC, which was kind of curious because the award he received was for a podcast he did with Audible years before he started working at the public broadcaster. Well, since our story was published, the Walkleys have actually reinstated those pages. All very, very interesting, and there's certainly more to come on what has become one of the biggest media stories in Australia in a while. Make sure to head to lamestream.com.au to subscribe to make sure you stay up to date with the best coverage on the story from us at Lamestream.
Yeah, and in that story, we really also tried to lay out what the actual editorial journalistic questions are and tried to lay that out and explain it as best we could. So much is happening on this story, and we just thought it was important to try and put down what the questions are that are at stake. So hopefully it's a great read for anyone at lamestream.com.au.
I have nothing left to say on that one. Sorry.
Yeah. So, Oz, let's begin with what has, I think, strangely become the biggest story in the world over the weekend. Oz, people may have seen these images of what is reported to be 50,000 migrants from Morocco crossing into the Spanish territory of Ceuta. This footage is everywhere, Oz, over the weekend. It led just about every TV news bulletin. It was all over social media. For those who haven't seen them, these images are of tens of thousands of Moroccans coming up from beaches, wandering around the deserted streets of this pretty small seaside town, Ceuta. Spanish police looking kind of bewildered at what's happening around them, a bit overwhelmed. And they were just played again and again and again, these images, all over the world and in Australia. It was quickly picked up by the right, who obviously claimed that this was sort of vivid evidence to support their campaigns around quote-unquote mass migration. In the UK, Nigel Farage was quick to say that this footage should be a wake-up call for Britons and that, quote, this is a battle for the future of our civilization. Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni actually went as far as saying that she would suspend mutual EU free travel with Spain over this to safeguard what she called Italy's national security from these people making it to Italy. And even Donald Trump made a really big deal of it, telling Americans that this is what would happen to America if people didn't vote Republican in the midterm elections, which are coming up. Here are his comments over the weekend.
I watched it, I said, boy, I'm going to say it because I knew you were going to be at Camp David, and I say, that's going to be a talking point for the midterms, because when you look at what happened to Spain, they don't know what to do, and it's happening again today. They're coming in by the tens of thousands. They're just invading the country.
Oz, you hear Trump use the word invasion there? Like, that is very much how the right all over the world wanted this footage to be seen by people. Before we get into actually what happened and talking people through that, what did you just make of how much this exploded as a story and the global attention it received?
I found the first wave of coverage of this story to genuinely be very confusing. And I think in some cases that's because there was very deliberate misreporting on the part of some outlets as to what had gone on because of their own political views. And I think in other cases, a lot of outlets just don't have reporters on the ground in Morocco or Ceuta and didn't really know what was happening. So were being heavily influenced by social media, which in turn was being pushed in a particular direction, not just by people like Trump, but by so many far-right actors online. If you followed the story, I think, from the first few headlines and the first bits of coverage that were being aired, I think it was very easy to draw the conclusion that tens of thousands of people had somehow crossed from North Africa into Europe. And some outlets literally just reported that. Fox News, for example, reported that, quote, migrants had stormed the border of northern Spain. Right, that was used in a clip that wasn't just aired on Fox News, but spread all over social media. It was shared online by the US Vice President, J.D. Vance, and his sharing of that clip has been viewed more than 4 million times alone. And that claim is just 100% verifiably false. No migrants crossed the border into northern Spain. Even in Australia.
Ceuta is in North Africa. It's not on the European continent. It is a Spanish territory in Africa.
100%. And that, even that basic fact that you just laid out was bizarrely not in a lot of articles. I really had to do some work here. The Wikipedia page for Ceuta, I think, got a lot of hits in the last couple of days as people tried to figure out what was going on. The Australian coverage, particularly the first few stories, I think, again, relying on wires and overseas reports, also very, very vague. The first story I read on the ABC website about this said that 40,000 people have crossed from Morocco into Spain. right? Like that is how the summary framed the issue, which is obviously very alarming and doesn't quite capture the reality of the situation. It's all very scary and confusing if you read that stuff. To me, Scott, it also just seemed frankly unbelievable that somehow on one day, 40 or 50,000 Moroccans had somehow transported themselves to Europe. Didn't really make much sense. And it turns out that I was right to be skeptical, because this is not really a story about a genuine surge of migrants from North Africa into Europe. It is a much more complicated story about geopolitics, about Moroccan-Spanish relations, how misinformation spreads online, and even the involvement of governments like US and Israel.
Yeah. And before we get into all those machinations that seem to be going on, let's just talk about what actually seems to have happened here, as opposed to a lot of those early reports and far-right comments. So Ceuta, not in Europe, as mentioned. It's a Spanish enclave in North Africa that has been Spanish territory since the 1500s. Migrants who get there do not actually have any right to travel on across the Mediterranean to Spain. And also, the EU lists Morocco as a safe country of origin, which basically means it's very, very hard, basically impossible for Moroccans to claim refugee status or seek asylum at all, even if they made it to mainland Europe. So really, none of these people were ever going to stay in Ceuta or ever make it to Spain, let alone Italy, like Giorgia Meloni is terrified they were going to. But if you watch the interviews with these Moroccans who made it across into Ceuta, they seem very confused about this. You know, they are saying they believe that they would be able to be naturalized, they'd be able to go over to Spain, and they're kind of bewildered that this isn't the case and that they're going to get cleared off the streets. Most of them, when they realized, actually just went back of their own accord within the first 48 hours after this mass crossing. So why did they have this idea all of a sudden at all? Like, why did they try and come all at once? Why did they think that they would be able to stay? That's where things get really interesting. A lot of the early coverage blamed Spain's kind of lax immigration policy. The left-wing prime minister of Spain is making it easier for undocumented immigrants to work in the country, and a recent court decision in Spain means if you arrive in Ceuta, Spanish authorities actually have to hear your immigration claim before they deport you. They can't just kind of pack you back on a bus immediately. But these things that were cited, first of all, happened over a month ago, Oz, so it doesn't really make sense that this all happened now. And these two things don't actually interact. Like, making it to this little Spanish enclave in Africa won't get you into this naturalization scheme the Spanish government are doing. In fact, this whole idea that Spain has been sort of soft on immigration, enticed these people, just seems to be junk to me. Like, immigration to Spain, first of all, is in decline, as the Prime Minister laid out in a press conference. Only 12,000 people immigrated to Spain in the first half of this year, and that's down on last year. So overall, there isn't some surge to get into Spain as it's liberalizing. Second,
that doesn't really pass the pub test, right? Because if it was that easy to get to Spain and then into the rest of Europe, I honestly would be doing it. Like, no disrespect to the wonderful city of Melbourne, but if I could get Spanish citizenship by rocking up to Ceuta or Spain, honestly, I'd do it, you know?
I'd think about it. And second, can I explain this border for a second?
Yeah.
So this tiny sort of beachside town is on the tip of North Africa. On the tip of North Africa, surrounded by Moroccan territory, and it's on the tip that is closest to Spain along the Gibraltar Strait. The land crossing from Moroccan territory has been massively securitized with a 19-foot fence with barbed wire on top and security cameras. And if migrants rush that fence, get over it, climb that 19-foot fence, do you know what they have to do next? Climb a second 19-foot barbed wire fence. And there's about 1,000 police and civil guard who patrol the border. So Spain has made it so difficult to cross that most people who try this these days now usually try and make a 5-kilometre swim from Moroccan territory, risk getting washed into the Mediterranean where many can drown, and did during this crossing. So the idea that like Spain has just made it really easy, not really the case.
Yeah.
And in the lead up to this, it seems like misinformation spread all over TikTok within Morocco, telling people they would be able to get residence if they made it into Ceuta. And then there are also reports that the guards on the Moroccan side of the border mysteriously sort of went AWOL on the day this happened, basically, tacitly at least, allowing this giant number of people to attempt the crossing. The BBC reported it's not clear where the Moroccan border guards were at this point and why the groups of migrants were not dispersed or stopped, like on that side of the border.
Yeah.
That's where this story starts to get really interesting, doesn't it, Oz?
Yeah, I think once it becomes clearer that this isn't some genuine surge of thousands of Moroccans deciding, oh, wow, there's a legitimate way for us to get European residency, let's take it up, you realize that there is a combination of misinformation at play and apparently some kind of involvement from the Moroccan government themselves. It starts to become a much more interesting and fascinating and kind of disturbing story, right? And there seems to be a lot of agendas at play here, but a key role seems to have been that played by the government of Morocco. And one of the fault lines in Moroccan-Spanish relations has to do with a region called the Western Sahara, right? This is a former Spanish colony. Morocco now claims sovereignty over it, but there is an indigenous separatist movement that is fighting for autonomy. And interestingly, Scott, this campaign, the Western Saharan Independence Campaign, actually gained some prominence very, very recently, thanks to, of all things, Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, which was filmed in part in Western Sahara and faced some criticism for not getting permission from the occupied population. Now, this has also become a big geopolitical issue for Morocco generally. In 2020, under a Donald Trump negotiated deal, the US said it would recognize Morocco's sovereignty of Western Sahara if, curiously, Morocco normalized relations with Israel, which would be a very unusual thing for a Muslim-majority North African country to do. But Morocco did it. Then in 2023, Israel followed suit. It recognized and normalized relations with Morocco, and it supported Morocco's sovereignty over the Western Sahara. Now, when it comes to Spain, Spain has historically adopted this position of neutrality on Western Sahara. But you know what happened in 2021, Scott? Nearly 10,000 Moroccans surged into Ceuta. And in response to that, the Spanish government decided to shift its position towards recognizing Moroccan sovereignty. So there is this history of Morocco using that border crossing as leverage to put diplomatic pressure on Spain. And it seems like that's more likely to have been the case here rather than this genuine migrant surge. And in fact, the UK Telegraph, the newspaper, is reporting that Western intelligence sources believe that this latest influx of Moroccans into Ceuta was in fact coordinated by the Moroccan government and was in fact done to put diplomatic pressure on Spain. So that is a crash course in the Western Sahara and the involvement of all these countries, but it is without a doubt, I think, given the sourcing of this stuff, given how widely it's being reported, that this was about diplomacy and political leverage more than any kind of genuine surge of refugees, asylum seekers, or migrants.
Yeah, that's the thing to underline here is, it's being reported in the open that there's intelligence sources apparently saying that this was coordinated by the Moroccan government, not just some influx. On the Israel stuff, it is certainly very weird how many Israeli politicians just piled on to this story. You wouldn't think Israel has much to do with like a Spanish kind of enclave beach town colonial outpost getting... having migrants come into it, but apparently this is a big issue for Israeli politicians.
Yeah, it's the one colonial beach enclave that Israel hasn't already, flooded with ex-IDF soldiers. So that's
yeah. I mean, look, like I think partly that's because Spain's left-wing government has been one of the strongest critics of Israel. Certainly probably the strongest in Europe along with Ireland. They've shut airspace to weapons shipments to Israel. They've recognized Palestine. Itamar Ben-Gvir posted a statement on this just like hours after it happened, saying Spain's prime minister demonstrated great concern for Hamas, so should basically open the borders of Spain. Israel's ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, said Spain should stop lecturing Israel and explain to the world why it maintains colonial enclaves in Africa. And this just seems to be a long-running obsession for Israel because Morocco is such an important ally in the Muslim world for Israel. You know, Netanyahu's son Yair, this got some attention by Al Jazeera and others, dug up this tweet of his from back in 2019 where he tweeted a map of Ceuta and said, "Dear Arabs and Muslims, want to free occupied Arab Islamic lands? Here's a good start."
Wow.
Very strange stuff from the Israelis. And look, pro-Israel figures in the US have been lobbying the Trump administration this year to recognize Moroccan sovereignty over Ceuta. All extremely weird. But to come back to, I guess, where we started in this conversation, Oz, and that's that, you know, this story was used as a migrants swarm Europe story by the right. And once you know all of this context we've gone through, like that Spain's immigration is not some kind of basket case liberal approach disaster, that these people had actually no real shot at ever making it to Europe, that there was disinformation circulating in Morocco, that the Moroccan government may have had a role in encouraging this as a stunt, weaponizing it. Once you know all of that, it seems so irresponsible for anyone to have jumped to conclusions, believed how far-right figures like Trump and Farage were characterizing this whole thing, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's one thing for the far right to try to capitalize on this. Like, that's not surprising. That is exactly what they would do here. The fact that a lot of that framing made its way into reputable mainstream media is pretty concerning. And Australia has not been immune from both of these things. We've seen the far right here echo what the far right in Europe and the US have been saying. Pauline Hanson posted on social media, quote, "Up to 50,000 young Muslim men swamped a small Spanish territory illegally, overwhelming police and sovereign borders. We have a significant job ahead of us to ensure the boats don't start back up here in Australia." Now, kind of amazing, Pauline Hanson sort of went further than a lot of other far-right figures by specifically talking about the religion of these people. Like, even far-right figures in Europe didn't do that, which is pretty extraordinary. But it does speak to how they're all singing from a very similar song sheet. And the media, including here in Australia, is giving them a boost. The SMH and the Age's Europe correspondent, David Crow, this is how he opened his analysis of this situation. "The sight of at least 50,000 migrants storming into Spanish territory is certain to harden opinions about migration in Europe when the political right is on the rise. Like, sure, dude, if you frame it, if you talk about tens of thousands of people storming Spain, then probably the far right will get a boost out of it because that is the exact language that they want you to use, right?" And he goes on in that piece to say, "The astonishing images are being likened to an invasion of Spain." Now, Scott, who did you just quote calling it an invasion of Spain?
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump. Like, David Crow is just like erasing that Donald Trump said it and just putting it in his own words. It's pretty extraordinary laundering of far-right messaging, I think, in this piece. He goes on to say that this is going to keep feeding deep anxiety in Europe about border security and the scale of immigration to the country. I think, like, that's a piece that looks pretty out of touch with reality, given what we now know about what happened, right? Like, it doesn't really stack up, given that this is now pretty clearly a political power play by Morocco and amplified by countries opposed to Spain and their foreign policy, including the US and Israel. Like, it's just not a coincidence that all these Israeli politicians decided that this is one issue that they want to pile in on. Andrew Tillett, the Australian Financial Review's Europe correspondent, took a very similar line. He opened his piece with, "The stampede of an estimated 60,000 migrants from Morocco into a Spanish enclave is the gravest migration crisis to confront Europe since German Chancellor Angela Merkel's misguided act of compassion to allow 1 million Syrians to resettle in a country just over a decade ago." Now, there's a lot there to unpack, Scott, but I just do want to talk about the racism inherent in so much of that language, whether it's migrants storming borders or stampedes of people. This is language exclusively used to refer to black and brown people in the Middle East and North Africa.
Let alone just saying that it's the gravest crisis when like half these people just of their own volition were like, yeah, I can't stay. I'm going back. Like,
Yes.
what is the
Yes.
grave nature of this crisis, Andrew?
Exactly. The whole AFI piece is an example of the kind of total normalization of what was once fringe extremist and white supremacist rhetoric. In one example, Scott, on this example, this comparison he makes to Merkel welcoming Syrian refugees, he says, it was a noble gesture, but it turbocharged the anti-immigration sentiment within Europe. What had once been marginal became mainstream as more voters saw neighborhoods transformed. The reaction from many progressives has been to dismiss complaints as racism. The right, meanwhile, warns about white replacement and civilizational decline. So that's his summary of the migration debate. On one hand, some people think it's racist. By the way, it is fucking racist. On the other hand, some people are concerned about white replacement and civilizational decline. Like, that used to be what... That language was what like people like Anders Breivik and far-right terrorists use, and now it's just considered part of normal debate.
Yeah, also just the idea that Merkel accepting those Syrian refugees is, certainly a failure or something. It's like, well, the EU supported the Syrian revolution and the Free Syrian Army and backed it. You could say, if you back a revolution and a civil war happens, you have like a moral obligation to take in the refugees from that conflict. I mean,
if you bomb the Middle East for a decade, what do you... Yeah, maybe that's the mistake, brother.
On this Tillett article in the AFR, Oz, you sent this to me. And this line that it had any similarity or anything comparable to like Angela Merkel's policy on Syrian refugees, I could only find one other person who compared this thing that's just happened to Merkel's policy on Syrians from 10 years ago, right? The only other place I could find that was on the far-right TV network GB News, right? Which made the point on Friday, Australia time, before Tillett filed. So, maybe that's a hint on Andrew's TV viewing habits.
Very interesting.
I don't know where else he could have gotten that, but this was a line being run on air by a GB News contributor called Alan D. Miller, who's a frequent guest, and got his break in media and the UK right by opposing COVID restrictions and vaccines for people under the age of 18. That's his background as an analyst. So great stuff.
Oh my God. Amazing drawing these connections and just seeing how this stuff goes from one crazy network into Australian mainstream media, potentially. One theory, Scott, that's doing the rounds, and it's been promoted by the former Human Rights Watch executive director, Ken Roth, is this idea that what's going on here is that the US and Israel are trying to break Spain's control over the Strait of Gibraltar, right? Which is what Ceuta on one side and Spain on the other side. The strait connects the Atlantic to the Mediterranean. It's an important, I guess, passage of water. I don't know how true that specific theory is, but I do love that now every geopolitical issue is about straits. Like, straits have never been hotter, never been a bigger topic in politics and conversation. First, the Strait of Hormuz did a lot of heavy lifting here. Then we had the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which is the one that the Houthis are trying to shut down. I mean, what are your thoughts on straits? You got any favorite straits?
I feel like Malacca hasn't gotten a lot of love lately. I mean, incredible food around the Straits of Malacca, like
Absolutely.
all sides of that strait. Some of the most flavorful food in the entire world is based around that strait. Also, great piracy strait. A lot of good piracy stories around there.
Absolutely.
I feel like an exciting strait.
Malacca Strait, I think the name of a Malaysian restaurant we went to a bunch of times when we were at the ABC.
Yes.
Near Ultimo.
Yes.
That's a solid, hard to think of a strait I like more than Malacca Strait, given all the connotations. We'll be traveling over the Bass Strait this week.
Yes.
We got to Tasmania, won't we?
Yes, absolutely. Shout out Torres Strait.
Torres Strait, great strait.
Great strait.
The strait that separates North and South Islands of New Zealand is called the Cook Strait, which I feel like is New Zealanders, they like to claim that they're real woke on this kind of stuff. Like, how is Cook still the guy that strait is named after? They can do better than that, can't they?
Yeah. Also, you'd be like, I mean, if we're going to name straits the Cook Strait, which I don't think we should anyway, but wouldn't that be like every strait in the Pacific? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
could be the Bass Strait, could be the Torres Strait. They could all just be the Cook Strait, according to that logic.
Just to close this off,
Scott,
Oh, dire straits, good.
Dire straits.
To just close this off, though, Oz, I feel like my main thought sitting back from all this, when you look at that Australian media stuff you ran through, It just seems so transparent to me that the only time Australian media ever cover Europe is around like mass migration fears. Like you never hear any, like when is the last time the ABC, the AFR, the SMH talked about actually what is going on in Spanish politics or like what is going on with the, like it is only in the context of migration that Europe becomes a front page story. And it just seems so incredibly transparent to me. Like, and if you're a Europe correspondent in Australian media, it seems like it's basically footage of migrants doing bad things in Europe, front page, or like I caught up with Hugh Jackman promoting his latest movie. And that's sort of all you file on. Like, it's crazy to me.
Yeah, totally. It says a lot, I think, about the personal obsessions about some of the individual reporters involved, you know, these kinds of guys from these particular demographics and backgrounds and news outlets, and they're just being told this is what you want to focus on. It's a really, really good point. Okay, coming up after the break, why Gina Rinehart has launched legal action threatening the ABC. Scott, as part of my recent adventures in the world of free-to-air TV, which I've documented on this podcast with you and also in our newsletter, I've been watching the ABC's reboot of Race Around the World. This is a series that originally aired in the late 90s, and it followed 8 amateur filmmakers as they traveled around the world and had to film these short documentaries from different global destinations. And it aired every week on the ABC, and the documentaries were judged by a panel of experts, and there was a winner, and there was an audience choice winner. It's probably most famous for being the origin story of John Safran, who was actually disqualified on the show for breaking some rules, but he went on to win the People's Choice Prize, and that launched his TV career. It was pretty like iconic show for the ABC back then.
Yeah, super iconic. I mean, the show was also hosted by Richard Fidler, who back then was best known for being part of the sort of new wave musical comedy band, the Doug Anthony All-Stars. He went on to be, you know, prominent member of the Australian Republican movement, now hosts Conversations on Radio National. Kind of hard to imagine that career pathway at the ABC now, going from like provocative new wave comedy band to broadcasting stalwart. Yeah. But it like launched a lot of careers in Australian film and TV, Oz, not just John Safran's. I mean, like the winner, Olivia Rousset and Bentley Dean, have both gone on to direct and produce heaps of documentaries. And like one guy from it ended up being the EP of Bondi Rescue.
Oh, wow. That's what an incubator. That's crazy.
What an incubator. And like, I got to say, I do feel a bit guilty that we haven't talked about the new Race Around the World reboot before now, Oz, because we do give the ABC a bit of stick for not having any pathways for talent, not having a way of getting any new voices onto the ABC. And here, they are actually doing that and putting newcomers on TV. It's literally something that the ABC hasn't done since 2009 when I got to be a part of Hungry Beast. Like, that is how long and overdue it is.
Yeah, before we give them too much credit, though, let's get into what's actually happening and the controversy around the show. So they obviously brought back the series this year. It's now hosted by Zan Rowe, and John Safran has returned as one of the judges. And look, the show's pretty good. I think the contestants have different backgrounds and different styles. Some are more serious, some are more comedic. But yeah, to your point, it is great to see the ABC doing something that is fun and putting new talent on air, and it not just being another comedy panel show, which is what most of the ABC's programming slate has become. But the show
and I love
is now
Zan. Shout out Zan Rowe.
We love Zan Rowe. It's also at the center of a huge, huge controversy right now, Scott, because of one line of dialogue from one short film by the contestant Kate McGuinness. Let's have a listen to the controversial dialogue. Now, I actually watched that episode when it aired, and interestingly, John Safran reacted to that bit of her film, saying that he was currently in trouble over a joke he had made about Gina Rinehart on a different SBS show, and he was now being investigated over complaints that were presumably made by Gina Rinehart. So it was kind of picked up on the time that this was a bit spicy, a bit controversial. It turns out Safran was quite on the money there, because last week the ABC released an apology from Kate McGuinness. She said in her apology, "My writing is cartoonish and always satirical. Unfortunately, jokes do not land with everyone. Its purpose was never to be taken literally." Now, that apology actually made me quite angry, Scott, because if you watch this show, or you watch Kate's work, or you watch that particular video, it's very obvious that her work is satirical, and she was not literally suggesting people do physically harmful things to Gina Rinehart. I sent you a series of very sweary text messages when I saw this apology, because Race Around the World has always been this edgy, provocative show, right? Like Safran's entire career has involved offending people because of their race, their religion, or whatever. So the idea that this satirical video aired on the ABC results in an apology felt like a sign of how risk-averse things had become. But the actual details of the campaign that Gina Rinehart has waged against the ABC to get to this point is really, really fascinating. And I think it's a really important case study of how the right are putting pressure on the ABC and how ABC management are responding. So it's going to break down for you how we went from that episode being aired to the apology being issued. So strangely, Scott, for 2 weeks after that episode went to air, there was no public outrage or commentary or discussion about this clip. Then all of a sudden, on July 24th, which is 12 full days after the episode, Andrew Bolt loses his mind about it on Sky, which, by the way, has gone through a rebrand, is now called News 24, which is something we're going to have to figure out how we talk about. Let's have a listen to Andrew Bolt losing his mind about this clip.
A little taste caution, by the way, of something coming up. I heard something so disgusting on the ABC, which we're all forced to pay for, something the ABC could have stopped from going to air and chose not to. Now, before I show it, and you're not going to believe your ears.
Okay, so then that evening, The Australian wrote a story about it. And kind of bizarrely, The Australian said that had occurred the previous Sunday, when in fact it was 2 weeks ago. So I don't know whether they thought this was a new controversy or just deciding to make it seem like they hadn't missed a story. But they went
Also
to the ABC.
suggests that they didn't actually watch the show, to be honest.
100%. Very, very, very good point. They went to the ABC for comment. And interestingly, the ABC was pretty robust in defense of it. I want to get your take on what you make of this as someone who has seen a lot of these statements and gone to the ABC for a lot of statements, right? The ABC said, in this case, the film was intended to be satirical in tone and considered to be editorially justifiable within the context of the program. What's your kind of analysis of that statement from the ABC?
Yeah, I actually think that statement is good. I think that's the kind of thing I would want to see the ABC say. I think what's driving a lot of this outrage is people see that quote in text about mincing up Gina Rinehart like a sausage roll, and in text on a page, it just so completely misses the context it was broadcast in, which is, first of all, the whole short by Kate is a self-deprecating joke about being sort of an overwhelmed, nihilistic young person who doom scrolls and isn't doing anything useful, and it's very slacker core in its delivery, and kind of is about ridiculous skills that you'll need to learn to survive in our doomed future world, like training yourself to stare at water bubbles as if that's going to fix anything. The joke is on the character of her. And it is that she is in absolutely no way prepared for some kind of revolutionary violence. It's impotent. The joke is how impotent it is. So that's one element of why it's defensible, because of that editorial context. And secondly, Lee Sales, as a judge, criticized that line. So that's another editorial defense, because it was balanced by Sales' criticism of it. I completely think that statement by the ABC is good. But yeah, interesting that Kate issued an apology. You imagine some managers at the ABC, I would say, pushed her into doing that. And that kind of thing, I worry, actually keeps the cycle of this kind of story going rather than end it.
Yeah, I think the fact that the statement was written by her or came out of her words, but it was released by the ABC, does suggest that there was some ABC management involvement. But yeah, I totally agree with you in terms of how the ABC originally did defend it. And these things, the way the ABC works is any individual statement or a 10-second clip from a show can't be used as a basis to bring down the whole thing, because there are these responses. There's people like Lee Sales talking about all the reasons that you gave. The question for me then is, like, why did the ABC go from offering a pretty robust defense to then Kate issuing this apology? And in fact, why did the right-wing media start talking about it 2 weeks after the episode aired? Well, we now know that the day before Andrew Bolt and The Australian covered this story, Gina Rinehart herself, through her company Hancock Prospecting, wrote to the ABC, asking them to immediately remove the segment from all its platforms, publicly apologize to Rinehart, and undertake a comprehensive investigation into how it was approved and published, right? So that seems to be what kicked off the right-wing media into launching this series of stories about the ABC in this episode. They've since been pretty relentless in their attacks, particularly News Corp's The Australian. They've run multiple stories with headlines like "Not Sorry Gina," "Auntie Defends Torture Video," and "ABC Accused of Failing Women Over Disgusting Gina Rinehart Satire Video." Great to see The Australian standing up for women for once. There you go. The Minerals Council of Australia has also launched a criticism of the ABC, and WA Labor Premier Roger Cook has launched an attack on the ABC, saying, "I haven't seen the footage in relation to this issue, but I find the language confronting and I think it's unacceptable." So now we've got Roger Cook. This is crazy.
Yeah, this is such a fascinating timeline you've laid out. And can I just say, maybe this is editorially rogue of me, but it seems so obvious to me that all of these people, from Andrew Bolt to The Australian to Cook, what they were sent was a copy of the complaint by Hancock Prospecting. They were CC'd a copy of the complaint, and they are covering that. They didn't watch the show. They have no actual complaint about the show. They didn't watch it.
I mean, respect to Roger Cook for actually saying, "I haven't even watched it." Well, if you haven't watched it, sit the fuck down, man. This has got nothing to do with you. It has all the hallmarks, Scott, of a very coordinated attack on the ABC, obviously kicked off by Rinehart, and she's enlisted all of its usual enemies, whether it's News Corp or the Minerals Council. So my kind of analysis is that amount of pressure, the non-stop stories, ABC management decide they need to do something, and they decide, look, we'll get Kate to issue this apology. But to your point, Scott, is that going to satisfy Gina Rinehart or just kick this story on? And obviously, it has just kicked this story on. Rinehart has now released a new statement. She's threatening the ABC with legal action. She says she sent legal letters to ABC Chair Kim Williams and to the Managing Director Hugh Marks. The ABC Ombudsman is also already investigating complaints about it. And it's shaping up, I think, as a pretty big test for how vigorously the ABC is going to defend satire. And look, they could pass that test, right? It could be that they do these investigations and they say, our first statement was right, this was editorially justified, piss off. I hope that's the case. I am a little bit worried. I think there's reason to be worried given how conservative the current leadership of the ABC is, how there have been examples of them caving to right-wing pressure. There is the fact that Rinehart and News Corp seem happy to just talk about this non-stop and keep putting that pressure on the ABC. And the fact that we've already seen their position shift by issuing that apology seemingly just in response to pressure. I think there's some things to be concerned about. It's going to be a very interesting issue to watch, but what do you make of it all?
Yeah, look, I don't want to get too ahead of the Ombudsman's investigation in that I guess I hope that they will find there's no merit to the complaint and then the ABC stands by it and there's not a story. Of course, the ABC has definitely changed. I worry that might not be the outcome. But I thought just like this conversation actually gives us an opportunity to talk about how much the ABC has changed when it comes to these kind of complaints and risk-taking and things. And if you compare this to, it's like for like, the original show the ABC first did for young talent, which actually inspired the original Race Around the World back in the 90s. There was this show called This Day Tonight, which was for young talent. It started in 1967, and it's where literally every famous boomer TV journalist got their start. I'm talking Mike Willesee, George Negus, Caroline Jones, Richard Carlton, Gerald Stone.
Wow.
All that era all started on this show. And they were on it and hosting it and reporting on it when they were in their 20s. Their 20s.
What a time.
But look, this is maybe my favorite ABC lore story of all time of what this show did. So back when this show was airing, The most wanted draft dodger during Vietnam was a guy named Michael Madison. He was literally on the run, Oz, would encourage other people to dodge the draft. The police were trying to hunt him down. This Day Tonight embarrassed the police by just going up the road to Sydney University, finding him and convincing him to go to the ABC studios and do a live on-air interview. But not only that, Oz, during the same show, they lined up a live interview with the Attorney General of Australia in Canberra. So they have him on live first, got him to say how hard it was to catch this guy. Cops are hunting to try and get him, but it's really hard. Then embarrassed him by crossing to the Sydney studio where they had Matson in a chair right there. The Attorney General starts freaking out live on air, telling the hosts to keep him there until the police arrive and arrest him. Incredible TV. Now this is the bit of ABC just lore, which I was told when I started at Hungry Beast. This is, and we were told this to encourage us.
Nice.
Apparently, how Richard Carlton and Gerald Stone, who were doing this segment, handled it so no one got in trouble, is they had actually already called the police and told them, right, and tipped them off. So job done. They can't be accused of covering it up. They're not breaking the law. Except they also sneakily arranged an escape route for the draft dodger down the fire escape at the ABC to a waiting car to whisk him away before the cops actually showed up. So they smuggled him out of there. The Prime Minister, after this went to air, blasted the ABC. The Daily Telegraph called the show, quote, a slanted, class-conscious left-wing talk show.
Wow.
But the ABC stood by it. And not only stood by it, all of those people are considered media legends, media royalty, the gold standard, and kids today are unbalanced. You're like, can you imagine anyone at the ABC smuggling a wanted man out of a studio? Like they'd be sent to a struggle session, fired, discredited, their careers over before they ever started. Like that is the difference when you think of how they're handling controversy now to that is crazy.
That's an amazing story. Yeah, there's so many stories from that kind of era that demonstrate how good journalism can also involve, really taking risks and thumbing your nose at authority. And it is a shame that so much of that has disappeared from the culture. But, you've got people like you telling those stories and keeping that fire alive, Scott Mitchell. So thank you very much.
I hope so. I love keeping those stories alive.
Before we sign off from this episode, there's a pretty big story to do with the Iran war brewing that people might want to be keeping an eye on in the next couple of days. Scott, you want to break that one down for us?
Yeah, Oz, literally as we're recording, Trump is apparently considering major new strikes on Iran. We're talking about bombing Tehran, the capital again, really intense bombing, but has also given a last-minute ultimatum to Iran, which is apparently under consideration that would avert this. So listen, by the time people hear this, we could be back to major US airstrikes across the whole country. And while that's happening, Israel has been upping its campaign in southern Lebanon, including detonating explosives underneath a UNESCO World Heritage listed castle, demolishing several villages, and there's reports of renewed firefights between Israeli soldiers and the Hezbollah. So it is all looking not good, very much on a knife's edge, and obviously we'll be watching that closely for people throughout the week.
Yeah, probably coming back to that one on Thursday. All right, well, that is it from us. If you enjoyed the show, we'd love it if you left us a review or shared it with a friend. You can email us questions or tips. You can tell us your favorite straight by emailing us at contact@lamestream.com.au, and you can head to our website to subscribe and support our work. Scott, I'll see you back here on Thursday.
See you Thursday. I cannot wait to hear about listeners' straights.